Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, March 13, 2025. Looks like no federal government shutdown. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he will vote for the Republican-drafted 6-month funding extension, and reports say that suggests there will be enough Senate Democrats joining him to reach the 60 votes needed to advance the bill towards final passage and then passage before the Friday night deadline. President Trump says he will put a 200% tariff on European wine in retaliation for an EU 50% tariff on U.S. whiskey. The president's tariff policies, major topic at today's Senate confirmation hearing for the nominees for U.S. ambassadors to Canada and Mexico. President Trump meets with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at the White House, as Russian President Vladimir Putin says he generally supports a 30-day ceasefire in the war with Ukraine, but has reservations. White House withdraws the nomination of Dave Weldon for Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention right before his scheduled Senate confirmation hearing. Senate Health Committee approves the president's nominees to lead the National Institutes of Health and Food and Drug Administration. And Congressman Grijalva, Democrat of Arizona, who has served for 20 years, has passed away from a long battle with cancer. From the Hill, Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer of New York announced on the Senate floor Thursday that he plans to vote to advance a House-passed 6-month government funding bill, despite the strong opposition of many Democrats who say the bill would create a slush fund for President Trump and Elon Musk. Schumer is only the second Senate Democrat to state definitively his intention to vote to advance the GOP-written bill, joining Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. But it's highly likely he will give political cover to other Democrats to vote to advance the 99-page package. Here's Senator Schumer on the Senate floor.
Unless Congress acts, the federal government will shut down tomorrow at midnight. I have said many times there are no winners in a government shutdown, but there are certainly victims, the most vulnerable Americans who rely on federal programs to feed their families, to access medical care, and to stay financially afloat. Communities that depend on government services to function will suffer, and suffer greatly. This week, Democrats offered a sensible way out. Fund the government for another month to give appropriators more time to do their jobs. Republicans rejected this proposal outright. Why did they reject it? Because Donald Trump doesn't want the appropriators to do their job. He wants full control over government spending. He isn't the first president to want this, but he's the first president to cower his party into submission, so that Republican rejection leads us to a decision. That Republican rejection leads us to a decision. And it's not really a decision, it's a Hobson's choice. Either proceed with the bill before us or risk Donald Trump throwing America into the chaos of a shutdown. This, in my view, is no choice at all. While the CR bill is very bad, the potential for a shutdown has consequences for America that are much, much worse. For sure, the Republican bill is a terrible option. It is not a clean CR. It is deeply partisan. It doesn't address far too many of this country's needs. But I believe allowing Donald Trump to take even much more power via a government shutdown is a far worse option. And before I explain why, let me be clear about one thing. No one on my side of the aisle wants a government shutdown. Members who support this CR do not want a government shutdown. Members who oppose this CR do not want a government shutdown. Members who oppose this CR want the Republicans to take their responsibilities more seriously and to negotiate spending bills that will address the many needs of the American people. I respect them for that. Unfortunately, though, this Republican Party is the party of Trump. As bad as passing the CR is, as I said, allowing Donald Trump To take even much more power via a government shutdown is a far worse option.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. Earlier, before he made this announcement that he would support the Republican bill, and it was uncertain whether there would be a shutdown or not, President Donald Trump at the White House said if there were a shutdown, the Democrats would be to blame.
We're looking at an impending government shutdown Friday midnight.
Yeah.
Democrats for 30 years straight have said if there's a shutdown, bad things happen. Do you anticipate direct negotiations yourself with conference leader of the Democrats, Chuck Schumer?
If they need me, I'm there 100%. It's right now it's 2 or 3 people. If it shuts down, it's not the Republicans' fault. You know, we passed a bill where we had an incredible Republican vote. We only had 1 negative vote, a grandstander, you know, 1 grandstander. There's always a grandstander in the lot. But it was amazing. People were amazed that the Republicans were able to vote in unison like that, so strongly. If there's a shutdown, even the Democrats admit it'll be their fault. And I'm hearing a lot of Democrats are going to vote for it, and I hope they do. This is an extension. But ultimately, we want to vote for one big, beautiful bill where we put the taxes in, we put everything in. We're going to have big tax cuts. We're going to have tremendous incentives for companies coming into our country and employing lots of people. It'll be, I called it, in a rare moment, one big, beautiful bill. That's what I like, and it seems to be that's where they're heading.
President Donald Trump at the White House. Since his remarks, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced he would support the Republican version of the continuing resolution, or CR, to prevent a government shutdown on Friday. From CNN, a federal judge has ordered half a dozen federal agencies to immediately reinstate probationary employees fired last month as part of the Trump administration's effort to rapidly shrink the federal workforce, calling the effort a sham. The preliminary injunction issued from the bench Thursday by U.S. District Judge William Alsup requires the Departments of Veterans Affairs, Agriculture, Defense, Energy, Interior, and Treasury to rehire the employees. The judge said that he might extend the order to cover other federal agencies at a later time. The judge wrote the reason that OPM wanted to put this based on performance was, at least in part, in my judgment, a gimmick to avoid the Reductions in Force Act, because the law always allows you to fire someone for performance. That was from CNN. Wall Street today, the Dow down 537, NASDAQ down 345, S&P down 77. And CNBC writes that President Donald Trump on Thursday doubled down on his escalating tariff plans, even as his economic agenda continued to rattle investors and contribute to a weeks-long stock market sell-off. Donald Trump said, when asked about his plans during an Oval Office meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, "I'm not going to bend at all. We've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore." Donald Trump specifically said he would not change his mind about enacting sweeping reciprocal tariffs on other countries that put up trade barriers to U.S. goods. The White House has said those tariffs are set to take effect on April 2nd. That was from CNBC. President Trump posting today, the European Union, one of the most hostile and abusive taxing and tariffing authorities in the world, which was formed for the sole purpose of taking advantage of the United States, has just put a nasty 50% tariff on whiskey. If this tariff is not removed immediately, the U.S. will shortly place a 200% tariff on all wines, champagnes, and alcoholic products coming out of France and other EU-represented countries. This will be great for the wine and champagne business in the U.S. That's the post from President Donald Trump, and he was asked about this in the Oval Office.
Take a look at the EU. We're not allowed to sell cars there. It's prohibitive because of their policies, and also their non-monetary tariffs. They put obstacles in your way that you can do nothing about. But if you take a look at what happens, so we sell no cars to Europe, I mean virtually no cars, and they sell millions of cars to us. They don't take our agriculture, we take their agriculture. It's like a one-way street with them. The European Union is very, very nasty. They sue our companies. Apple was forced to pay $16 billion on a case that, very much like my cases that I won. They shouldn't have been even cases, but we felt they had no case, and they ended up having an extremely favorable judge and decision. But they're suing Google, they're suing Facebook, they're suing all of these companies, and they're taking billions of dollars out of American companies, many more than the ones I just mentioned. And I guess they're using it to run Europe or something. I don't know what they're using it for, but they treat us very badly. China obviously treats us very badly. Almost everybody does, and I blame past presidents, to be honest, because when I was president, we received so far about $700 billion from China over the years on the tariffs that I put in. No other president got 10 cents from China.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. Detroit News writes that former Michigan Congressman Pete Hoekstra, who is President Donald Trump's pick to be U.S. Ambassador to Canada, affirmed his support for Canadian sovereignty while testifying Thursday before the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. Hoekstra noted, however, that he could not control the president's public remarks that Canada should become America's 51st state. Hoekstra is appearing on a panel with Trump's nominees for ambassador to Mexico and Japan. The hearing comes amid a swiftly escalating trade war between the United States and Canada, with Trump imposing on-again, off-again tariffs on America's northern neighbor and closest trading partner, and angering Canadian leaders with his repeated suggestions that Canada should agree to be annexed into the U.S. That was from the Detroit News. Here's part of that hearing. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, ranking member of the committee, questioning Pete Hoekstra about tariffs and Canada.
We have the highest percentage of Canadian Americans of any state in the country. I find it very troubling that we are seeing our national anthem booed at ice hockey games, and that the country where we've got the longest undefended border in the world, where we have had such a positive relationship over the years, is now viewing America in the way they are because of this president's statements. They find it particularly offensive that he's talking about Canada's the 51st state. And I don't blame him, I gotta be honest. So how do you, I appreciated your opening statement and your talking about the importance of Canada to the United States, but how do you see approaching turning around that negative relationship that has developed because of the president's statements, and how do you envision addressing tariff issues?
It's a great question. Obviously, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that myself, pending, the confirmation by the Senate of having to go there and being kind of the tip of the spear on this. I experienced similar things when I went to the Netherlands. There was a lot of hostility or concern about some of the objectives of the first Trump administration, which were really about fairness, getting the Dutch to pay for NATO, all right? Working with the Dutch to confront Russia on Nord Stream, the pipeline. The Dutch are great with water. They have money, so they were helping build it and to finance it. And what we really spent a tremendous amount of time on is focusing on the strength of the relationship between our two countries. Your state, my state, we have thousands of people, thousands of businesses that rely on this relationship, and they just, they see what's going on at 30,000 feet, but they gotta go to work every day, and they need to make this work. We have cooperated with Canada on so many things. In Michigan, it's the Great Lakes. That's important to us. It's trade. It's business. My experience on the Intel Committee, it is about NATO and those types of things. Canada's part of Five Eyes. So we have a great history of working together, and we know how to make this work. We now have to make and take that and say, we know how to make this work. Now let's do it and apply our experience to the priorities that the president has outlined. Freer, fairer trade.
Pete Hoekstra, nominated for U.S. Ambassador to Canada, testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Questions from the ranking Democrat on the committee, Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. Pete Hoekstra was born in the Netherlands and during the first Trump administration was U.S. Ambassador to that country. Also testifying today at this same hearing, nominated for U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Ronald Johnson. Axios writes that he said during his hearing that U.S. military strikes on cartels, even without Mexico's knowledge, are an option. The article says that President Trump, on his first day in office, signed an executive order naming 8 drug cartels, including 6 in Mexico, as foreign terrorist organizations, a move administration ally Elon Musk contended made them eligible for drone strikes. And the article also notes, in the run-up to the 2024 election, Donald Trump said he'd absolutely consider strikes against cartels if Mexico didn't, quote, straighten it out really fast. Here is Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, asking nominee Ronald Johnson about this.
Sovereignty is a key core principle. I understand that the designation of the drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations reflects widespread concern and anger in the United States about the cartels and the impact of fentanyl. Would you agree that we should not take any military action against cartels in Mexican territory without the knowledge and consent of the Mexican government?
Sir, I think any decision to take action against a cartel inside Mexico, our first desire would be that it be done in partnership with our Mexican partners. That said, I know that President Trump takes very seriously his responsibility to safeguard the lives of U.S. citizens, and should there be a case where the lives of U.S. citizens are at risk, I think all cards are on the table. I cannot respond to what the Commander-in-Chief might decide based on the information he has. I've been a private citizen for the last 4 years, but I think we would prefer to work with our partners in Mexico. Yes.
Let me just make an assertion, if I might, Ambassador. You recognize Mexico as our #1 trading partner. You talked about how we could find positive ways to further integrate supply chains, further partner with them. We have big opportunities. We have to balance these two. USMCA, one of the main accomplishments of the first Trump administration, the integration of our economies, Canada, US, Mexico, very positive. But if we were to take action without consultation and without permission, then we are putting at real risk that. And that's been a give and take that I hope will involve respect for sovereignty.
Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, questioning the nominee for U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Ronald Johnson, at today's Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. The Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said last month, after President Trump designated Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations, this cannot be an opportunity for the U.S. to invade our sovereignty. With Mexico, it is collaboration and coordination, never subordination or interventionism, and even less invasion. You're listening to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio. Political Europe writes that Vladimir Putin says he backs a ceasefire, but don't hold your breath for an immediate breakthrough. Russia's president on Thursday laid out what looked like a raft of delaying questions and burdensome conditions on American proposals to end the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. Putin will huddle with U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff in a closed-door meeting at the Kremlin on Thursday night. He is being careful to say he broadly supports the initiative, but is simultaneously setting out what he sees as impediments to an overnight breakthrough. Russia is already insisting any deal must include international recognition of seized territory, a commitment that Kyiv won't join NATO, and pledges that European peacekeepers will not serve in the country to protect against another Russian attack. That was reporting from Politico Europe. Here is President Vladimir Putin at a press conference in Moscow, alongside the president of Belarus.
I would like to thank the President of the United States for paying so much attention to regulating the conflict in Ukraine. Of course, we all have lots of current issues to deal with, and the chairman of China and the Prime Minister of India, heads of states of Brazil and South Africa, they are dealing with this issue, and they're paying a lot of attention to this, and we're grateful for this. And we're hoping that their activity, we understand that their activity is aimed at reducing loss of human life in the conflict. secondly, is we agree with the proposals for the ceasefire, but our position is based on the assumption that the ceasefire would lead to a long-term peace, something that would remove the initial reasons for the crisis.
Russian President Vladimir Putin at a news conference in Moscow. That audio and translation coming from Sky News. President Donald Trump was asked about President Putin's comments during his news conference in the White House Oval Office.
He went off trip to Moscow. You spoke about it. What sort of agreement do you hope he comes away from it with?
Well, we'd like to see a ceasefire from Russia. And we have, not been working in the dark. We've been discussing with Ukraine land and pieces of land that would be kept and lost and all of the other elements of a final agreement. There's a power plant involved, a very big power plant involved. Who's going to get the power plant and who's going to get this and that? And so, it's not an easy process. But phase one is the ceasefire. A lot of the individual subjects have been discussed, though. We've been discussing concepts of land because you don't want to waste time with a ceasefire if it's not going to mean anything. So we're saying, look, this is what you can get. This is what you can't get. They discussed NATO and being in NATO, and everybody knows what the answer to that is. They've known that answer for 40 years, in all fairness. So a lot of the details of a final agreement have actually been discussed. Now we're going to see whether or not Russia's there, and if they're not, it'll be a very disappointing moment for the world. Yeah.
Vladimir Putin just said he is open to a ceasefire, but he does still have some concerns. He suggested that you two should speak directly. Do you have plans to speak to him soon? If so, when are you confident you can get this across the table?
Sure. He did say that today. It was a very promising statement because other people are saying different things, and you don't know if they have anything to really, if they have any meaning, or I don't know. I think some of them were making statements. I don't think they have anything to do with it. No, he put out a very promising statement, but it wasn't complete. And yeah, I'd love to meet with him or talk to him. But we have to get it over with fast. Every day people are being killed. It's not like, as we sit here, 2 people will be killed. Think of it. 2 people are going to be killed during this little period of time. Thousands of people a week are dying. So we really don't have very much time. We have to make this fast. It shouldn't be very complicated.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. NBC News writes that President Trump's special envoy for Ukraine and Russia was excluded from high-level talks on ending the war after the Kremlin said it didn't want him there. A U.S. administration official and a Russian official tell NBC News. Retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg was conspicuously absent from 2 recent summits in Saudi Arabia, one with Russian officials and the other with Ukrainians. Russian President Vladimir Putin thought he was too pro-Ukraine. A senior Russian official with direct knowledge of the Kremlin's thinking told NBC News. Joining President Trump in the White House Oval Office today was NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who talked about NATO and the war in Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, dear Donald, again for hosting me, and but also for taking time in Florida a couple of weeks after you were re-elected.
That's right.
And of course, our phone call a couple of weeks ago, and I must say, Trump 45, you originated the fact that in Europe we are now spending, when you take it to aggregate, 700 billion more on defense than when you came in office in 2016, 2017. But that was Trump 45. But when you look at Trump 47,
it's gonna be hard to tell.
What happened the last couple of weeks is really staggering. The Europeans committing to a package of 800 billion defense spending. The Germans now, potentially up to $500 billion extra in defense spending. And then, of course, you had Keir Starmer here, the British Prime Minister, and others, all committing to much higher defense spending. We're not there. We need to do more, but I really want to work together with you in a run-up to the Hague Summit to make sure that we will have a NATO which is really reinvigorated under your leadership, and we are getting there. We also discuss defense production because we need to produce more weaponry. We are not doing enough. And not in the US, not in Europe, and we are lacking behind when you compare to the Russians and the Chinese. And you have a huge defense industrial base. Europeans buying 4 times more here than the other way around, which is good because you have a strong defense industry, but we need to do more there to make sure that we ramp up the production and kill the red tape. So I would love to work with you on that. And finally, Ukraine. You broke the deadlock. As you said, all the killing, The young people dying, cities getting destroyed. The fact that you did that you started the dialogue with the Russians, and the successful talks in Saudi Arabia now with the Ukrainians. I really want to commend you for this. So, The Hague is my hometown. I love to host you there in the summer and work together to make sure that that will be a splash, a real success, projecting American power on the world stage.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in the White House Oval Office. Reuters writes that foreign ministers of leading Western democracies sought to show a unified front in Canada on Thursday after 7 weeks of rising tensions between U.S. allies and President Donald Trump over his upending of foreign policy on Ukraine and imposition of tariffs. The group of 7 ministers from Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United States, along with the EU, convened in the remote tourist town of La Malbaie, nestled in the Quebec Hills, for 2 days of meetings that in the past had been broadly consensual. That was from Reuters. The Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly gave an opening statement to the media with the other ministers, including U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, sitting around the table. She said the focus would be peace and security.
In recent years, we've shown it in many ways, maybe to curb the COVID-19 pandemic, maybe also for a strong response to defend Ukrainian sovereignty, or again to counter foreign interference. We've worked together also to champion human rights, democracy, and the protection of vulnerable communities from violence and persecution around the world. So, of course, peace and stability is on the top of our agenda, and I look forward to discussing how we can continue to support Ukraine in the face of Russia's illegal aggression, and we will want to see just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Of course, we want to foster long-term stability as well in the Middle East in the interest of all the people in the region, and we want to build resilience and stability in the Indo-Pacific, in Haiti, and in Venezuela. We also want to make sure that we bring back peace and stability in Sudan and in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly opening the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting today in Quebec, France. The leaders of the group of 7 nations, President Trump and the rest, will be meeting in June in Alberta, Canada. Washington Today continues in a moment.
For 46 years, C-SPAN has been your unfiltered window into democracy, giving you direct access to Congress, the Supreme Court, and the White House. But this public service isn't guaranteed. C-SPAN receives no government funding and relies on supporters like you. All this month, in honor of Founders Day and Brian Lamb's vision, you can help keep democracy unfiltered.
To the American people, now is the time to tune in to C-SPAN.
Donate now at cspan.org/donate.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you listen to podcasts. Story from the Washington Post: the White House has withdrawn the nomination of Dave Weldon, a former Florida congressman who questioned vaccine safety, to lead the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention amid concerns he could not be confirmed by the Senate. The Senate Health Committee announced Weldon's nomination had been pulled shortly before he was scheduled to testify Thursday morning before the panel. The pulling of Weldon marks a rare setback for a Trump administration nominee. The Senate has confirmed every controversial choice brought to a full vote on the floor to date. Weldon, a 71-year-old doctor who left Congress in 2009, drew scrutiny for his longtime promotion of the false claims that vaccines can cause autism. That was from the Washington Post. Senator Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, member of the committee, spoke to reporters.
The news came as a surprise to me. I was on my way to the markup, which was going to be followed by the hearing on his nomination. So it's not something I anticipated.
Did you express concerns to the White House about Weldon?
I did not express concerns to the White House. I had some reservations, but I certainly have not reached a final judgment, and I followed my normal practice of waiting till the hearing was scheduled and hearing and respond in public forum.
Were your reservations related to vaccines?
I've said all I'm going to say about this.
Thank you.
Senator Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, speaking to reporters in the hallway of the Senate office building. That audio put online by Daily Caller. New York Times writes in a statement released later on Thursday, Dr. Weldon blames Senator Collins and Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, the committee chair, for torpedoing his nomination. A spokesman for Mr. Cassidy said the senator had been looking forward to the confirmation hearing. And as you heard, Mrs. Collins' office disputed Dr. Weldon's account. That was from the Times. Dave Weldon put out a 4-page statement that also criticized the CDC for not doing enough to show that vaccines are safe. He wrote, "We might be able to do research and figure out why some kids have a bad reaction to the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. Clearly, Big Pharma didn't want me in the CDC investigating any of this." From Stat News, the Senate Health Committee voted on Thursday to endorse Marty Makary as Food and Drug Administration Commissioner and Jay Bhattacharya as Director of the National Institutes of Health. The committee voted 14-9 to advance Makary, with Democratic Senators Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire and John Hickenlooper of Colorado joining Republicans. The vote for Bhattacharya was 12-11 along party lines. The next step for the nominees is a vote by the full Senate, where a GOP majority all but ensures they will be confirmed. That was reporting from Stat News. Before those votes, the committee leaders spoke. Here is Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, the chair, and Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, the ranking member.
We're at a critical moment in public health. While the COVID-19 pandemic has ended, the loss of trust in public health and science agencies remains. And this comes as the nation faces serious health threats like a measles outbreak, which has already claimed at least one life, maybe two, and hospitalized many more. One life of a child from a vaccine-preventable disease. So the American people's trust in public health institutions must be restored. To start, we need public health leaders committed to transparency and finding unbiased solutions to Americans' most challenging health problems. Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Makary have demonstrated that they are ready to take on this responsibility. If confirmed as director of the NIH, Dr. Bhattacharya committed to promoting free and open debate at the agency, allowing all viewpoints to find the best outcome for Americans' health. He also discussed modernizing NIH, empowering scientists to find the next life-saving medical breakthrough. Moving on to the Food and Drug Administration. If confirmed as FDA Commissioner, Dr. Makary committed to promoting medical innovation while upholding FDA's gold standard of review, so Americans can benefit from the latest life-saving medicines and devices. He emphasized the need to address obesity and chronic disease in collaboration with other administration officials. Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Makary have the experience and the vision to achieve President Trump's objective of making America healthy again. I support their nominations, urge my colleagues to do the same. With that, I recognize Senator Sanders for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we are voting on the nominations for Director of the NIH, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, and the Commissioner of the FDA, Dr. Marty Makary. I will be voting against both of these nominations. The NIH, with a budget of $48 billion, is the largest funder of medical research in the world. This research has led to new treatments and prescription drugs that have significantly improved the lives of Americans and people throughout the world. Every American should be proud of those achievements. But these treatments don't do any good if people cannot afford them. And the truth is that is exactly what is happening in our country today. It is beyond comprehension that we continue to pay, in some cases, 10 times more for the same exact drug to people in Canada or other countries around the world. People go to the doctor, they get a prescription, they can't afford it. That's absurd. Not only has the federal government not effectively regulated the price of prescription drugs, although we have made progress under the Biden administration in terms of negotiating prescription drug prices with Medicare, the taxpayers of this country over the years have provided hundreds of billions of dollars in research and development into new prescription drugs that are provided enormous benefits. Unfortunately, despite all of the money that we have spent on the development of prescription drugs, drug companies take the money, they say, thank you very much, and they go out and they charge the American people sky-high prices. In 2023, this committee released a report that found that the average price of new treatments that NIH scientists helped invent over the past 20 years is $111,000. $111,000 per treatment. In virtually all cases, American taxpayers are paying far more than people in other countries for the exact same medicine. In my view, we need an NIH director who is prepared to take on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry and use every tool at his or her disposal to substantially lower the outrageous prices of prescription drugs. Unfortunately, I do not believe that President Trump's nominee to lead the NIH is that person. Not just the NIH. The FDA was established by Congress to regulate prescription drugs and the food that we eat, among many other things. According to the FDA's website, its mission is to make medical products more effective, safer, and more affordable. More affordable. Again, all of the great breakthroughs don't mean anything unless people can't afford them. And today in America, tens of millions of people cannot afford those treatments. And for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I will also oppose the FDA nominee.
Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, and before that, Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, the leaders of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, before the successful votes to send these nominations to the full Senate. NIH Director nominee Dr. Jay Bhattacharya by a 12-11 vote, and FDA Administrator nominee Dr. Marty Makary by a 14-9 vote. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin announced Tuesday night that the EPA is terminating $20 billion in grants awarded by the Biden administration for climate and clean energy projects, and the Department of Justice and FBI are investigating the circumstances surrounding how the money was designated for the recipients. A Fox News article reads, the program approved by Congress under the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act was formerly known as the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, but is more commonly referred to as the Green Bank. Two initiatives worth $14 billion and $6 billion, respectively, aim to offer grants to nonprofits, community development banks, and other groups for projects focused on disadvantaged communities. EPA Administrator Zeldin posted a video.
Over the past few weeks, it has been a high priority of mine to identify and bring to light countless issues regarding a Biden EPA gold bars scheme. $20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution in a deliberate effort to limit government oversight, doling out your money through just 8 pass-through, politically connected, unqualified, and in some cases, brand new NGOs. The money has since been frozen, and the Department of Justice and FBI have been investigating. You may have heard how a group linked to Stacey Abrams received $2 billion after reporting a mere $100 in total revenue the year before. Or how the founding director of the EPA's program dished out $5 billion to his former employer after shaping the legislation that created the program from his White House post. These two examples have only been the tip of the iceberg. I'm here to report back to the American people that as of today, I have officially terminated these grant agreements entirely. Not only does EPA have full authority to take this action, but frankly, we were left with no other option. This termination is based on substantial concerns regarding program integrity, objections to the award process, programmatic fraud, waste, and abuse, and misalignment with the agency's priorities, which collectively undermine the fundamental goals and statutory objectives of the awards. The only way we can reduce waste, increase oversight, and meet the intent of the law as it was written is by terminating these grants. It is my unwavering commitment to President Trump, Congress, and to you. The EPA will once again be an exceptional steward of your tax dollars. I will have it no other way.
EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin posting that video Tuesday night. Today, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island, said there was no crime committed in the awarding of the $20 billion in environmental grants.
You've got the improper effort to pursue the fake crime. You force out the person who said, no, there's no crime here. You try to shop it around the office and nobody else will sign. You then have the weirdness of the U.S. attorney proceeding essentially solo with no record of experience as a federal prosecutor, so he's clearly just flailing about. He goes before the magistrate judge says no, and it still doesn't end. Then reportedly, the Department of Justice starts shopping it to other U.S. attorneys' offices. They'd completely blown up in this office. They had a bad ruling from a judge, and they keep shopping it to try to find other U.S. attorneys' offices. And apparently, nobody would do it. There's still no order out there. But Kash Patel's FBI agents are now running around asking people questions. I hear it's under the authority of a U.S. attorney's office in Florida. The parties involved are the EPA, Washington, D.C., Citibank, headquartered in New York. If they had to shop it all the way down the East Coast to Florida to find a U.S. attorney's office that was willing to turn FBI agents loose, again, that's a sign of things gone badly, badly awry from proper Department of Justice procedure. And when you begin with the U.S. attorney saying, I don't like this fund, I want to go after this fund isn't proper, before he even gets in office, not a prosecutor, starts bumbling around and wrecking things trying to get this done. You know, this is a trail of misuse and abuse of the criminal justice system, whose purpose is to create the illusion of criminal activity so they can freeze a fund that has already been appropriated and obligated and has been sitting out there since last summer for people who have made real commitments based on the grants that they were expecting. You know, there's a bus company we heard from yesterday. They've ordered parts for the new buses that were going to be bought. They have a supply chain people who are depending on them. They are having to deal with refinancing the company because the pledged money is not coming through. This whole thing completely stinks to high heaven.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island, speaking today at the Judiciary Committee business meeting before votes on 3 Justice Department officials, and they were all approved. John Sauer to be U.S. Solicitor General, Harmeet Dillon for Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, and Aaron Wrights for Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Policy. All 3 were forwarded to the Senate by a 12-10 party line vote. House Democrats are in day 2 of a 3-day policy conference in Leesburg, Virginia at Lansdowne Resort. There were news conferences today by the Congressional Asian Pacific Caucus, New Democratic Caucus, Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and also one with new female Democratic members. Reporter asked Congresswoman Catherine Clark of Massachusetts, the minority whip, and Congresswoman Sarah McBride of Virginia about recent relations between the parties.
I want to ask about some member conduct issues we've seen in the last few weeks. Republicans targeted Al Green. There was the recent outburst this week against Congresswoman McBride. Are you planning on talking at all to Republican leadership about the conduct of their members?
Yeah, I have a mixed reaction to this question because their focus on our decorum or our behavior while they are burning down things for people at home just makes me livid. It makes me livid. So let's get to work for the people of this country. I don't care if you voted for Donald Trump or you did not. You voted for a chance to get ahead. That if you play by the rules, you have a job that allows you to provide for your family, you pay your taxes, you are going to be able to be successful. That's the American dream. And now they are setting out to dismantle that American dream for people at home. And if they want to focus on censures, if they want to focus on acting like children and misgendering Sarah, like, what are we doing? Because they are systematically taking apart our country for folks at home who voted for them because they said they bring down the cost of living. They give opportunity. They want success for them. So we are going to stand strong in every single vote and say the focus should be on the American people and what they need. And we are not going to let you under, hiding behind Elon Musk and Doge, hiding behind this idea that somehow this is all in a matter of efficiency. You are not going to say that our veterans are government waste. You are not going to say that women and women's health care are somehow inefficient and have to be cut. You are not going to define our public schools as government waste. We are going to stand up for the American people and say, all people want is a fair shot. They're working hard, they're paying their taxes, they're playing by the rules. They should be able to be successful. That's what this is about. And they're focused, they're trying to change the subject to talk about, you know, did people stand up or did they just clap for a child who had survived childhood cancer while they are cheering for the cuts in NIH that are investing in researching and finding cures for those children. We celebrate that child's survival, and we think there should be hope for every single family who's facing a cancer diagnosis, an Alzheimer's, diabetes, ALS. And the way we do that is by keeping people's health care coverage and continuing to be a leader in innovation and research. They are tearing that up while they're talking about their rules of decorum.
We will not take a lecture on decorum from a party that incited an insurrection. I appear to live rent-free in the minds of some of my Republican colleagues. I wish that they would spend even a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, thinking about how to lower the costs for American families. I wish they would spend a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, figuring out how to make government actually work better, rather than making it work worse in order to prove that government can't work. They are obsessed with culture war issues. The Republican Party is obsessed with culture war issues. It is weird and it is bizarre, and the American people deserve serious legislators, serious elected officials who are focused on bringing people together to deliver real results for the American people, not to play games and not to engage in schoolyard taunts.
Congresswoman Sarah McBride, Democrat from Virginia, and before that, Congresswoman Catherine Clark, Democrat of Massachusetts, member of the House Democratic Leadership, at a news conference at the 2025 Issues Conference being held by the Congressional Democrats in Leesburg, Virginia. WGUN-TV in Tucson, Arizona, reports that Congressman Raul M. Grijalva has passed away at the age of 77 after a long battle with cancer. His office said in a press release Grijalva served as the U.S. Representative for Arizona's 7th Congressional District since 2023 and Arizona's 3rd Congressional District from 2003 to 2023. He was a Democrat. At a news conference today at the House Democratic Issues Conference in Leesburg with the Congressional Progressive Caucus, its chair, Greg Casar of Texas, paid tribute.
I'm Greg Casar. I represent the heart of Texas and proud to be chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Today we mourn the loss of Congressman Raul Grijalva, a real giant of the House and of the progressive movement. He was the longest standing chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, a champion of the environment and environmental justice, chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, and he was a real mentor and friend to me. I just remember in my first few days in Congress just being so just amazed that I was going to get to talk to the guy who would be sitting out in front of the Dem Club, who I watched on TV so much speak out early in my career against SB 1070, the Show Me Your Papers law in Arizona that really sparked a movement for immigrants' rights all over the country. And then just the chance to talk to him about music and dominoes and about when we were going to get real Mexican food in D.C. and his promises to ship some over to the Veterans Post every year for us to be able to sit down and hang out as colleagues. We are going to deeply miss him. I know the people of Arizona are in mourning, and our thoughts are really with his family, but it's just some very, very difficult news for us today. And I'd say both, really as a young Latino in politics, there were not that many Latino progressives with a real national profile to look up to, and he's somebody that I just was so proud to be able to call somebody that I looked up to and was able to serve with far too briefly. And I know that my colleagues here feel the same way and had long-standing friendships with Mr. Grijalva. So may he rest in peace.
Congressman Greg Casar, Democrat from Texas, chair of the Progressive Caucus, at a news conference today at the House Democratic Issues Conference in Leesburg, Virginia. Raul Grijalva, his office has announced, Democrat of Arizona, has passed away at the age of 77 after a battle with cancer. He served in the House since first elected in 2002 and was chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus from 2009 through 19. And finally, this week, C-SPAN announced the winners of its StudentCam documentary competition. Nearly 3,500 students from around the country participated in this year's contest, and the grand prize winner is Dermot Foley, a student at Montgomery Blair High School in Silver Spring, Maryland, where C-SPAN is available through its partner Comcast. This year, 150 cash prizes totaling over $100,000 were awarded to students who addressed the theme, Your Message to the President, What Issue is Most Important to You or Your Community? You can find out more about the contest and the winners at studentcam.org. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington. Email to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.